Go inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV with Rodney Orr and Gary Harris.
What a difference. I want to say what a difference a week makes. How about less than a week? Cyrus Kouandjio committed to Auburn on National Signing Day last Wednesday, but shortly thereafter, just minutes later, he began to have doubts. And then on Saturday, he sent in his letter of intent to the University of Alabama. Shortly after making his final decision, he posted on a Facebook page, his Facebook page, quote, "Thanks for all the love and support from the state of Alabama. Love all the new relationships I've made throughout this process. But at the end of the day, I'm going to keep the fam together. And I must say, roll Tide." And with that, we say good evening, everybody, and welcome in to Tider Insider TV, presented by Buffalo Rock. Tonight, Sierra Mist Natural, made with real sugar. A lot healthier than that processed stuff. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, who was batting 100% on his crystal ball. More on that later. I'm Gary Harris, and Rodney, let's get right into it. This became the story of the recruiting season. Cyrus Kouandjio, recruited for 2 years by Alabama. His older brother, Ari, already at the University of Alabama. Auburn became a player late in the game. We're talking really just a few weeks from signing day, but they got him in there for a visit. We knew the visit went well. You said it might be too close to call, but still, I think most people on Wednesday expected him to say the University of Alabama. He said Auburn University, and that set off a very unusual chain of events.
Yeah, it did, and I said on TiderInsider.com for the last week of the recruiting process, and, the fans didn't want to believe it, that it really was too close to call, and we saw how close it was. And I was really a little bit surprised, to be honest with you. I thought in the end that Ari, being here at Alabama, would certainly sway him on signing day. It didn't, but eventually it did. So it kind of worked out the way I expected, but just not kind of in the timely fashion that I thought it might.
All right, how highly rated, and I know that they've got to do it on the field, and you don't even rate players, but how highly rated is he? Well, ESPN's Tom Luginbill thought enough of Cyrus Kouandjio that when he committed to Auburn on Wednesday, they jumped from number 6 all the way to number 2 in the recruiting rankings, based on one player, ahead of Alabama, which at the time was 3. 6'7", around 315, 320 pounds. He looks about 275. He's that tapered, broad-shouldered, long arm, got those quick feet that you look for. He's a terrific prospect. Still going to have to earn it on the college level, but how big a pickup is this for Alabama at a position of need? I know they're bringing in Aaron Douglas at left tackle, possibly for the short term. He's a junior college player, but long term, how big was this signing for Alabama?
Well, first of all, it was huge. You certainly didn't want to lose him to Auburn for one thing, but for another thing, Gary, his talent alone speaks for itself. He's a great athlete. You mentioned his size. Still looks slim, could put on more weight. No telling how big he could get. I talked to the coach at DeMatha High School several times about Cyrus, and he's told me many times, he said, when you look at him, he really doesn't know how to play the game yet. He's just beginning to learn, and his potential is unlimited. And, I don't want to compare him to Andre Smith or anyone else at this juncture by any means, but I think, Gary, when you look at him, he's talented enough to play defensive end. That's how athletic he is.
And real quickly, Rodney, we have to move on, but it's exciting, I know, for the Kouandjio family to think about Ari and Cyrus some point lining up on that offensive line together.
Well, and I know a lot of fans have asked this question too, and I think it was probably used against Alabama in the recruiting process. Will Ari and Cyrus compete against each other? They're really two totally different players. When you look at Ari, yeah, he could possibly play left tackle, but he could play guard or maybe better suited at right tackle. And you look at Cyrus, and he's a made-to-order left tackle. So, no, they won't compete, I don't think, in any way on the offensive line.
Well, Rod, there was another switch that went the Tide's favor. This one on signing day. Russellville running back Brent Callaway, originally committed to Alabama for a long time. At the U.S. Army All-American game, he switched to Auburn. But on signing day, amid a lot of speculation that he might do what he did, he indeed decided to roll with the Tide, signing there, as you see, with the University of Alabama. Now, Alabama had recruited him as a linebacker, Auburn as a running back. He wants to get a shot at running back, and indeed on signing day, Nick Saban said exactly that. We'll give him an opportunity at running back first.
Yeah, and he was very successful this past season at running back. He primarily played running back. Gary played some at linebacker, but, you look at him there, you can tell he's got the ability to fill out. I've watched him play basketball. He's a very athletic kid. He's got legit height. He's 6'2 plus, and he's got the frame to get bigger. And again, we talked about his athletic ability. And really, that late switch to Auburn and then switching back to Alabama. We kind of projected that would happen. And, you know, Brent's been an Alabama guy all along, and, you know, you felt like that it was going to be difficult in the end for him not to get back to Alabama.
Well, last Wednesday got off to a great start when Asheville, North Carolina defensive end Jeffrey Pagan said he would sign and then did, obviously, with Alabama. Let's retrack his steps. Now, originally a Florida commitment, Urban Meyer leaves. He switches over to Clemson. Then about 2 weeks out, it became apparent that it was going to be an Alabama-Georgia battle. Georgia put a lot of time, a lot of effort. I mean, they threw the kitchen sink, so to speak, in recruiting terms of Jeffrey Pagan. They did everything they could to get this young man. That's how badly they wanted him. But he, and particularly his mom, really sold on Nick Saban in Alabama.
And we told you many times, especially on TiderInsider.com, that one catch here was that Georgia had offered an assistant coach on his high school coaching staff a position as a GA, and they were trying to use that as an influence to get Jeffrey Pagan to go to Georgia. It didn't work, and Alabama ended up with him. I think it's obviously it's a huge pickup, Gary, because when you look at him, he's very talented. He was committed to Urban Meyer at Florida there early on, and you know he was one of those elite defensive linemen. I know we talk about Jadeveon Clowney, and maybe nobody's really in his class, but Jeffrey Pagan was certainly up there. You know, one of the top 5 players in that defensive end area early on before he had the knee injury. Again, it was an MCL and PCL, and he's expected to be 100% by the time he arrives in June. Now, again, we'll have to see how that works out. But, you know, he's not a guy that you have to throw out there, Gary, and make him play right away or have him contribute right away. He'll have an opportunity to, you know, spend some time probably in the weight room and rehabbing and so forth. And, you know, in time, he's got a chance to be a dominant player.
But like Cyrus Kouandjio at left tackle, defensive end, a need position for Alabama, a big pickup with Jeffrey Pagan. Okay, now let's check out those recruiting rankings. And I would like to say Alabama had a unanimous top 5 class, but Scout somehow has the Tide ranked 6th. And you know, I talked to Andrew Bone. He explained it to me that based on per player average, Alabama is right there at the top with Texas. But overall, the Scout rankings has them 6th. But Rivals first, CBS Max Preps first, ESPN second. So another great class, Rodney. And I guess at this point, the news would be if Alabama didn't finish in the top 5. But, of course, ultimately, it'll be proven out on the field. And right now, it matters more what Nick Saban, more than anyone else, thinks of this year's class. Let's hear from the coach.
If Coach Bryant was up here 40 years ago, he would be saying the same thing. Pleased with this year's recruiting class, filled a lot of needs, got a lot of character quality guys in this class. So did anybody need me to say that, or could you have just wrote that on your own? Doesn't every coach say that after recruiting? Just like you never have a bad spring practice. You ever hear any coach say you had a bad spring ball?
Good point. I mean, every coach that stands up there across America is happy on signing day. You can always find the positives. But at the end of the day, it's about filling needs probably more than anything else, particularly with a team as talented as Alabama is coming back. Did this class, in your opinion, fill needs?
Yeah, I think so. You know, for the most part, Gary, when you look at it, of course, they needed a left tackle to replace James Carpenter. If Aaron Douglas can step in and do what Carpenter did for Andre Smith a couple of years ago, then, you know, they filled that need obviously immediately. And Nick Saban had talked about needing a long-term left tackle, which would be Cyrus Kouandjio. You know, so certainly I think they've done some good on the offensive line, and they got an explosive player in D. Hart as well. And, you know, when you look on the defensive side, though, and you look at the defensive linemen, Alabama needed guys athletic enough up front that could put pressure on the quarterback. You're talking about Xavier Dixon, Jeffrey Pagan. We talked about them. We talked about the big guy in the middle, Jesse Williams, best junior college player in the country, Quentin Dial. So they did well there. They also brought in a really great linebacker in Trey DePriest, brought in some great secondary people, and Hassan Clinton-Dix and some others. But, you know, a guy really, Gary, right around here that doesn't get a lot of publicity, Vinny Sinceri from Tuscaloosa Northridge. I mean, he's an outstanding player. I wouldn't be surprised to see Vinny be one of the first freshmen on the field, especially in special team type situations, because he's a real heady player, Gary, a great tackler, and I think he's going to have an outstanding career at Alabama.
And it's not completely over. There is still one recruit on Alabama's board. Coming up, where does Alabama now stand with the #1 prospect in the nation? Jadeveon Clowney. Rodney will have that info for you. Not all positive at this point. Tider Insider TV will also be taking your phone calls and getting to your emails. There's the information on the screen that you need to get in touch with us. And still to come, it's a topic that has generated a lot of discussion and controversy. What does Nick Saban say about the gray area of gray shirting? Stay tuned. You're watching the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV, presented by Buffalo Rock. Mike Groves, Alabama's new wide receivers coach and recruiting coordinator, replacing Curt Cignetti, who left to become head coach at Indiana University in Pennsylvania. Grove previously worked for Coach Saban in 2009 as a graduate assistant, was part of that national championship team. He went on to be the quarterbacks coach for 1 year at Louisville. He's also worked at Virginia, where he was a great quarterback, a terrific quarterback, and as the offensive coordinator, and served 1 year at in the NFL with the New York Jets. So welcome back, Mike Grove. And now, welcome back to Tider Insider TV, and we'll go back to recruiting. There's still one big prospect on the board, and I mean big. How about #1 in the country? The Tide and others still waiting to find out the destination of South Carolina defensive end Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney, who is considered to be the top prospect in the country, as I said, currently has South Carolina and Clemson, along with Alabama on his list. Clemson has moved in there strong. At this point, the Tide chances don't seem to be as good as the other two. Clowney's coach, Bobby Carroll, told a South Carolina newspaper that it's really nothing more than a proximity thing that is hurting Alabama. Carroll says his gut feeling is that Clowney is South Carolina's to lose. But as we mentioned, Rodney, Clemson's made a move there. Alabama's still not out of it. And as we've seen, if we've learned nothing else from this recruiting season, never say never. But no doubt Alabama is working uphill in this situation. What's your gut tell you on Jadeveon Clowney?
You just pretty much summed it up. Gary, we've talked about it for weeks. I mean, it's going to be difficult to go into another state and recruit the #1 player, not only in that state, but in the country, and, take them away from an SEC school. It's becoming more and more difficult to do. And as I said, I think it's, as you said, it's an uphill battle. Gary, of course, Clemson in that state, so they certainly would have an opportunity as well. But I think he'll probably end up at South Carolina is what I think. And I've thought that for a while, and we've said that. So, again, I think Alabama was in on him, did a great job throughout the process with Jadeveon Clowney, but as Bobby Carroll said, proximity.
Well, February 14th is the date he'll sign, so next week at this time we will know. Well, up next, Nick Saban weighs in on the recruiting practice of a gray shirting, and what will it take for the Alabama men's basketball team to put on dancing shoes in the month of March? And we'll get to your phone calls and emails, 205-348-WVOA. That's 348-9882, or you can email us there at the address on your screen. Tider Insider TV coming right back after this. Gadsden City wide receiver Darrell Collins had been committed to Alabama for months, but on National Signing Day, he signed with Kentucky. The reason being, Alabama coaches had told him he was going to gray shirt. He could go to Kentucky and enroll and play right away. Speaking of gray shirting, it's a hot topic issue right now. It's been the discussion everywhere on talk radio, and columnists, university officials, and more have been weighing in. In fact, Florida President Bernie Manchin went as far as to call the practice morally reprehensible, even though Florida, gray shirts too. It's a stance that Nick Saban obviously doesn't agree with.
I think there's a lot of criticism in gray shirting that is unfair. First of all, we have never, ever gray shirted a guy here who, when he decided to come here, didn't know the circumstances that we were going to take him to the University of Alabama, that he was going to be a gray shirt whenever he committed. And the reason is sometimes academic. The reason is sometimes physical development. So the player comes here with the idea that I'm going to start school in January. Now, I do not think that that's a bad thing, because if we weren't able to do that, those players would not have the opportunity to come here. They would not have the opportunity to come here. So we're actually creating an opportunity for a guy to be able to come here, not taking one away.
Well, let me give you two examples of gray shirts, Gary. John Parker Wilson could have gone to Ole Miss, could have gone to Tennessee, could have gone to Georgia Tech, probably, competed for a starting position as a freshman. He wanted to play at Alabama. The only way they could fit him in that class was as a gray shirt. That's what he wanted to do. So if you don't have the opportunity to gray shirt, John Parker Wilson couldn't fulfill his dream of coming here, and he becomes the all-time leading passer in school history. What about Drew Davis? Played at a small school, Sparta Academy in Evergreen, Alabama, wasn't ready to compete at this level. Decided to accept a gray shirt to Alabama, could have gone to Florida, but he wanted to play at Alabama. Had to work out for him. He started his 5th and 6th year out of high school. He starts. He wins a national championship. So, again, I don't understand what's morally reprehensible about it when they've agreed to it. That's what they want to do. It gives them an opportunity to fulfill a lifelong dream in some cases. So, again, I don't think it's anything wrong with it.
Well said. Another hot topic, the Alabama men's basketball team. They are on a roll. I'm telling you something. They've won 10 of their last 11. Their record in the SEC, 7-1. Overall, they're 15-7. Question now, Rodney, is will they make it into the big dance? And I've said all along, when people were crunching numbers and RPI in this and strength of schedule that, hey, I understand that's a factor. If Alabama wins the SEC regular season championship, which right now they're on track to do, they're going to get into the NCAA tournament. I don't care what the RPI says, strength of schedule says. How about some common sense? If they win the regular season championship, they're going to get in. They're going to have an excellent chance to get in, even if they don't win the SEC regular season title. This is a team playing great basketball right now.
Well, and I think right now the thing is, you know, you really don't want that to overshadow what they're doing right now, Gary. And again, I know that Anthony Grant's a lot like Nick Saban. He's focused on what's happening right now. And, you know, if you take care of what you have to do now, you'll make it.
Yeah, the SEC is a power conference. I know the pre-conference schedule, they didn't do very well, but if they win the SEC, they're going. And they've got a chance to go in a lot of other ways, obviously win the tournament as well. But they're in good shape right now. And they're beating teams from the East. And everybody talks about the East is better than the West. All right, let's go to the phones. First up tonight is Joseph in Tuscaloosa. Joseph, welcome in.
Hey, how you doing, Gary, Rodney? How y'all doing today?
Doing well.
Hey, say, now I want to know this though. Now, is there a chance that we could be #1 at ESPN if we get Jadeveon Clowney?
Joseph, I think it's probably an excellent chance. I mean, you know, obviously that hasn't happened yet, but yeah, if you get the #1 player in the country and you're sitting there at #2, that would be a big boost.
Well, you know, and again, you look at those rankings and you really have, sometimes it's difficult to figure out how they're compiled or whatever, but you look at ESPN and they jump Auburn up from 6th to what, 2?
Yeah, just with
when they got Cyrus Kouandjio.
Cyrus, I mean.
When they get Cyrus, and now Alabama was 3rd, and they jump up 1, so I'm not really sure why Alabama's not #1 in those ratings right now anyway. But, I mean, it really doesn't matter. The bottom line is that they had a great year. And, I mean, you know, there was a lot of Alabama fans. You know how many calls I got? Whining, people crying, worried that Alabama wasn't going to finish well. And I mean, you couldn't really ask for much more.
Yeah, worrying about things is always going to happen. Worrying about Nick Saban and Alabama football recruiting, probably not something you have to concern yourself with. Let's talk to CB. CB, what's going on?
Not much, man. I tell you, Rodney, this recruiting, they're starting earlier and earlier, and it's kind of getting uglier. What do you think is going to get? What do you think is going to be the bottom line on this?
Well, I don't know what the bottom line is going to be, but I agree with you 110%. I thought last year was the worst I'd ever seen, and this year, you know, surpassed that in terms of the ugliness and what you're alluding to, CB. And you know, I don't know what's going to happen with it, but again, it's gotten worse. That's no question about that.
All right, don't go anywhere. We got more of your phone calls and emails on the way. You're looking live at Tuscaloosa, Alabama, home of Titr Insider TV. We'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, take a look at the nice original elephant wear shirts that Rodney and I are wearing this evening, as always. Home of the original elephant wear? Well, it's the Locker Room, located on the University Strip since 1964. We thank them for providing us with original elephant wear. If you'd like to check out their selection, just go in the store Monday through Saturday or look them up online at www.locker-room.biz. You can browse the inventory and even order online. Go by and see Rush and Alex and the rest of the good folks if you can, but if not, find them on the web. You'll be glad you did. All right, let's go right back to the phones and talk to Marquise in Tuscaloosa. Marquise, how are you? You there? What's the status on Rodney Green and if he'll return for a senior year? Well, I think that's Robbie Green, and he's coming back. We talked about this last week. The safety out in New Orleans had to sit out 1 year in NCAA mandated suspension, but he'll be back and ready to go.
Yep, and I think it'll be a big addition, Gary, to the secondary. Certainly you're adding a guy at the safety spot that's experienced. He's been around. So, you know, you team him back there with Mark Barron, and Alabama should even be better in the secondary next year.
Let's go to Gordo, where they know a little something about football, and talk with Bobby. Bobby, welcome in.
Yeah, Gary, I just want to make a comment that I was able to go to Birmingham yesterday and hear Coach Saban speak.
Right.
And what a great motivator he is. And I can see why these young men want to play so hard for him.
Yeah, he's terrific. I mean, you know, Rodney, you and I have been listening to him speak for 4 years now, whether it be a press conference or a meeting with alumni and supporters or just even talking, you know, after practice with reporters. I mean, this guy is always on point, always has a message, and knows what he wants to say and knows how to say it, how to get his message out. Very effective speaker.
Yeah, and he is, Gary, and we talk about that, and we mention that. And there's been other coaches. I mean, Bill Curry was a great speaker. But let's just be honest, Nick Saban has a lot of substance. I think when you talk about, you know, what the players, they believe in what he has to say. And I think, you know, there's teeth to what he says.
Yeah,
you know, they have a lot of confidence in him.
If they don't believe in what you're saying,
right.
you're going to have a hard time getting across. Hey, quick email. We didn't get the name, but Rodney, could you talk about James Deloach that Alabama recently offered?
James DeLoach, actually, we had a story on him today. He's a defensive end from the state of Georgia over in Millen, Georgia, and he's about 6'3", 265, going to be one of the top players in that state next year. Originally from Gadsden, Alabama, is probably the early favorite because he is from the state of Alabama originally, and he grew up a big Alabama fan. So, again, I think Alabama will have an excellent opportunity with James DeLoach. He's going to be an outstanding player, but he also has a great defensive lineman for teammate Jonathan Taylor, about a 315-pounder. They want to go to school together. Alabama's offered both of them, so could be a package deal. We'll see.
All right, up next, thanks for the phone calls, by the way. He is the recruiting guru, the wizard of predictions, our Karnak with the crystal ball. Rodney Orr will go back and look at this year's predictions, and we'll see how he did. That's next when Tighter Insider Television continues. Last week, Rodney looked into his crystal ball on Tighter Insider TV and on TighterInsider.com. Rodney, let's run it down. Isaiah Crowell, Georgia, check. Michael Fanning, Alabama, check. Jeffrey Pagan, Alabama, check. Brent Callaway, Alabama, check. And Cyrus Kouandjio, in the end, made you look like a genius. Alabama, check. So you went 5 for 5. Hey, it's dinner time. Tonight, we're headed over to the Pottery Grill in Northport. I know there's a lot of great barbecue places in the Tuscaloosa area, but for my money, Pottery Grill is the best. We will see you there. Don't forget, if you missed any of tonight's show, only one place to go to watch it anytime you want, WVUATV.com. We'll have it posted for you later on this evening. And as we leave you tonight, let's take a look at some video from the newly renovated Foster Auditorium. Alabama women's basketball team will play Florida there on Sunday. It is gorgeous. Check them out on Sunday. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Have a good night, everybody.